який ми сьогодні дійсно презентуємо. Радий вітати всіх на
It is a
події
pleasure to greet everyone at the meeting of which is dedicated to the agricultural sector, the future of it. We will be talking about how the full-scale invasion contributed or impacted on the agricultural sector from the angle of economic development. So we have our participants both online and offline. We have our meeting is in both languages. So we will break down our meeting into two parts. The first part will be dedicated to the introductory words, a brief introduction of the research. It is a draft that we would like to share with you, and today we have a great opportunity to hear your feedback, and probably we will have actually a panel discussion during which the representatives of the state, investments, foundations, and other organizations will be able to talk about the agricultural sector of Ukraine in the context of the European integration, European markets. And in the second part of our discussion, we will have thematic workshops, and hopefully there will be really fruitful discussions about the topics we are going to talk about. I will give now the floor to Taras Vysotsky, the Minister of the Agricultural Policy and Food of Ukraine. I am grateful to you for joining our important event.
Вітаю всіх учасників.
Hello, everyone. Dear friends, dear participants, it is always a pleasure to join the experts in the agricultural sector in the context of Euro integration. I will not be able to listen to the first part regarding the draft, but I will catch up on that later. You know that we have Denis Leha from our team. He will stay with you. We also know that the war brings some challenges as it is happening to our ports. I will not be focusing on this issue, but we have to think in the medium term and long term. And now we have to both solve the issues arising now and, of course, think about our future. The European integration and the accession to the EU is a future of our agricultural sector. It is great to have different stakeholders, representatives of associations, active experts joining us to contribute to that kind of future. Importantly, we have to do our best to preserve our competitiveness. It might evolve in different ways, but actually our agricultural sector have proved really effective and competitive over the course of the 25 years. Our state has never hindered any processes in this regard, and we are ready to support our agricultural sector. Further, we are willing to share our experience as well, not just keep it to ourselves, but join the European Union, not just to learn from the EU, but also share our experience. These initiatives are really good. We are grateful to our partners, to the European Union. Today, we have the representative of the EU delegation to Ukraine. I'm grateful to all the experts joining this part of our work, which actually reflects our resilience. No matter what happens to us at night, all these attacks and everything, we have to work on our future. I hope that you have a fruitful, important discussion today, which will contribute a lot to our further steps. I'm sure that the messages we will hear today will just act as an added value for the benefit of our agricultural sector. Thank you so much. Now you are in a safe space and have a good day. Thank you so much, Taras, for support, for outlining the priorities and the daily work on supporting the agricultural sector, on boosting the competitiveness of the Ukrainian economy, which is one of the strategic priorities. Now I'd like to give the floor to Sir Giuseppe Aristei, the head of the agriculture and fishing and forestry of the EU delegation in Ukraine.
Thank you, Taras, and all the participants here. I will be very short. I've seen the minister has been very synthetic, and in the meantime, I try to stick to the formal welcoming that it was agreed with my colleagues. So please welcome on behalf of the European Union delegation to Ukraine and colleagues of the European Commission that I hope they are online and listening. The Ukraine agricultural sector is not only an economic sector, it is a pillar of the Ukraine resilience, a source of export of revenue, foreign currency, and a foundation for rural development, a major contributor for a good global food security. So the study we are discussing today was launched to guide the effective implementation of the Ukraine facility funds and the progressive alignment of the Ukraine agri-food sector with the EU standards and practices. The balance between meeting the accession criteria and maintaining competitiveness is essential. So, and this is where we are working on. Alignment with the EU standards should help Ukraine modernize and integrate, but it must also support the sector capacity to remain competitive and continue supporting both domestic and global market. I'm shortening my introduction because I think we need to work hands-on on the things. So, but one thing on I would say the recent blockage of the Black Sea ports preventing the European the agricultural export flow is something that reminds us that the logistic and export corridors remain a strategic vulnerability of Ukraine's economy, and for global food security, we need to look into this. And at the same time, the sector has shown remarkable adaptability. Farmers, processors, traders, public institutions and partners have continuously adjusted their route production decision financing arrangement. The restoration of a dedicated Ministry of Agriculture is also an important moment, because strong institutional leadership, coordination, and evidence-based policy will be essential in this phase. So we are extremely happy about this. This is why today discussion matters. The study should not only describe the sector, it should help identify the most urgent needs and critical gaps, the investment and financing needs, and the implication of the alignment, and also a situation of the small and medium producers and reforms that needs to be done. The value today event will depend on our inputs, all of us, and we encourage to be concrete. Where are the bottlenecks, recommendation, where the EU support, Ukrainian institution, private sector can do the most for what we are, for our common and joint endeavor. Thank you very much. Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Landell Mills, Civitta, and to all participants for your work. Have a good day and have a good work.
Giuseppe, thanks a lot for the welcoming remarks and support of EU in this important endeavor. And now we'll actually make through to the presentation. Зараз буде коротка презентація нашого дослідження.
Now we will present our study to set the scene because we need to kick off our discussion. We prepared a few 30 actually slides, but they are very brief and concise and very to the point. Speaking of the study of the economy in Ukraine, over the course of the last months, we conducted this study. We conducted a lot of focus group discussions, interviews, where our participants were able to give their opinions on the challenges, the needs of the agricultural sector. As Sir Giuseppe mentioned, Ukrainian economy is very adaptable, but there are still some challenges to tackle. We see that we have 30 slides. There you will see slide number 1. There are 4 parts. The objective of this study, the key analysis results, key challenges of the agricultural sector, and the factors contributing to a sustainable growth. So the 2 objectives are to better understand how to invest into the competitiveness of the agricultural sector during the process of the European integration and how the European integration will impact on the agricultural sector and how to build even a stronger economy. And the second objective is to understand how Ukraine facility or other instruments like Food for Him can help access financial resources for the Ukrainian agricultural sector. We conducted a comprehensive study, analyzed the factors that contribute to sustainable development, and today we will see the preliminary results. So it's just a draft, and it is not a secret that the agricultural sector of Ukraine is one of the most resilient sectors of the Ukrainian economy. It contributes a lot to the Ukrainian GDP. Unfortunately, before the full-scale invasion, was 9-12%, but now after the outbreak of the full-scale invasion, it accounts for 7.3% of the GDP, but at the same time, the economy of Ukraine has evolved. There are some changes related to the defense of Ukraine, and it's not a surprise because we have to be resilient, especially our economy. As for the export, the agricultural sector is one of the biggest exporter, generating revenues and currency. After the outbreak of the full-scale invasion, we have 37-40%. I mean, the share of the foreign currency exchange has increased. We can also see a positive result, which is related to the export of the raw materials, but we also export more products with the added value. For instance, when it comes to oil, oil is the kind of good. We also understand that import is going up, but the trade balance remains the same. We have to understand how to increase our export volumes and how the European integration will impact on this process. The agricultural sector is also one of the sectors that has a relatively high level of losses caused by the war. These are 82.5 billion euros, and also funding is necessary to help the agricultural sector recover. That is because of the contamination of our territory and many other factors that negatively impact on our agricultural sector. Another important thing is the climate change that also happens in Ukraine today. The temperature is plus 35 degrees Celsius in Kyiv, and we are really struggling. So there is a need for better irrigation, for growing some other plants that are not really typical of Ukraine, and we have to take that in consideration. And um, for instance, we have to take into account the climate smart agriculture, and that creates another need for additional investments. When it comes to irrigation, Ukraine has been investing a lot, but of course, the war had its negative impact. The blast of the Kakhovka Dam negatively affected the irrigation system. The potential was approximately 1.10 million. The situation is, of course, different. We have analyzed different portions. Speaking of the grains and oil plants, then the losses are bigger, and the need for the need is bigger, but we have to still invest into this sector. These investments are not possible if there is no access to funding. And actually, different enterprises have different access to funding. We analyzed this study by FAO, which testifies to the fact that the request from micro from the small and medium enterprises is higher. So the conclusion would be that big, capable enterprises, they take out loans, they have undergone due diligence, they are bankable, and that is really important and directly related to private investment into the agricultural sector. We have to invest more into the transparency of this sector. We have to contribute and invest into the capacity building. It's not only enough to invest into resources, but also you need to invest into the capacity or capability of the sector to make use of these resources. We analyzed different models like Poland, Romania, Bulgaria. For instance, Poland was more focused on like farms, family farms. Romania invested a lot into the investment, and the results are really different. If you look at the dynamics of export growth from Poland, Ukraine, Romania, and Bulgaria, then over 20 years ago, Poland now exports more than Ukraine.
And this is due to the monetary aspects of the export, because at the moment, Poland is able to export more higher marginal commodities. This was conditioned by the support programs from the EU, the taking participation in the common agriculture policy that will be also discussed in Ukraine during the harmonization process of our legislature and over to the negotiation process. Another important issue is the geography of export that changed drastically since 2025. We lost our traditional markets, but we started exporting more towards our neighboring countries. Why this is happening? There is an important issue here. We are very often told that we are exporting a lot to Poland or Romania, but actually, why do we do that? In order to invest into the transit potential. We have analyzed also the statistical data referring to the export from our main importer countries such as Poland and Romania, and a great share of export and re-export is taking place to other countries. So it's crucial to have a balanced assessment of how we build our export strategy. For us, traditional markets were the African countries or the Southern Asia. We limited our presence there, but this is something that can be reconsidered. European Union was used to be a highly marginal commodity market for us. Therefore, we are conducting this research. We want to analyze how we can build our export strategy better.
Один клік. А який клік? Відповідь очевидна. Так. Три групи країн.
Okay, three clusters is a very interesting methodological aspect here. I want to focus your attention on this one. Cluster A includes current export leaders. These are the products for which Ukraine holds the largest export value globally. So we selected the countries to where we export most. In year 2022-24, Cluster B, fastest growing Ukrainian exports. We looked at the commodities groups where Ukraine has shown the strongest growth trajectory in recent years, regardless of the volumes. So there may be a bit of an error in terms of the commodities where we hardly exported anything but started doing it. But we did try to make the sample illustrative. Cluster C mentions the high EU import dependency. So we were trying to define which are the sectors where Ukraine would be able to fill the deficit of the EU. So this is where we want to look at the competitive edge and the competitive potential, but we also need to look at the demand, where the demand lies, because this is what enables us to combine it with our competitive edge. Okay, the three graphs that we see in this slide are also quite interesting. We have traditional export commodities where we are leading in the market. There are some fast-growing Ukrainian exports, for example, refined sugar or maize seed or rapeseed and so on. So we did not export as much wheat or corn, but we really progressed in within these 3 years, year 2022 over to 2025, it means that there is some untapped potential and a positive trajectory. And the third graph is also quite relevant. It includes the products where there is high extra EU import dependency, which Ukraine can take advantage of in a positive way. This includes soybeans, dried kidney beans, shelled walnuts, soybean oil cake, linseed, and so on. We featured the greatest, like the largest ones, but there are many. So in this way, we want to really use the market system approach to define the groups of commodities and to define the factors that will be favorable for this kind of growth. We will present just part of the study. Of course, there is much greater detailed analysis that we also prepared. Another important thing to understand is the following: where do we have the challenges and the problematic issues? We looked at the agri supply chain. We looked at the supply, production, processing, and sales, and we gave it a thought. Where is the main risk? Where is the main challenge associated with a full-scale invasion? This slide is very interesting and it's very comprehensive. I could spend hours talking about this slide alone, but we will be happy to share the presentation with you for further reference. There are just a few categories where we still have a benefit, but lots of categories show regress and reduction that feature additional challenges. For example, access to oil processed products or energy. This is something that's the most drastically challenging. Access to logistics is also something that's very challenging, and that's something that's our enemy is trying to compromise for us. But we also looked at these things, and this enabled us to move forward to a better understanding of the general horizon, where we already have the progress, where we can proceed. And I think I'm still lacking understanding of how to use this clicker. But anyway, we also looked at the five main directions as regards the regulatory policies. It's not the first year that we've been trying to harmonize the legislatory framework with the EU standards, but here there is one fundamental change. If within DSFTA we were talking about the legislature solely, at the moment we're shifting the focus towards implementation, and this is a huge change. We have five main blocks that we looked at: the sanitary, veterinary aspect, the animal well-being, environment, and organic production. Lots of things that we have quite a lot of progress in already, but still the challenges remain. We outlined four main challenges that we need to work on. First, it's building institutional capacity, and it's very good news that the Ministry of Agriculture and Food is now a self-contained ministry that will be forming a state policy in Ukraine, which is really significant for Ukraine. But also we need to move in terms of statistics, we need to progress in terms of infrastructure and building the institutional capacity. The second block is the building of the adaptation of the producers. What can be the tools of support to SMEs, the minor producers? How can we provide better consultations, better training as part of AKIS? How can we assure investment into training skills and accessibility to external markets, since truly it is a very important section. We are facing quite a number of technical issues today, unfortunately. Let us go back to the presentation. Actually, we do not have a lot of them still remaining before we can start our discussion. But the main issue here is what are our directions of focus, including the access to funding, access to markets, and many things that will enable us to bridge the knowledge gap and really direct the allocations and investment where the higher demand lays as regards the linkage to the regulatory framework and the competitiveness of on the market. So what are the key challenges? We have 4 basic slides. First is state public management and institutional capacity. We have detected the gaps in institutional capacities. So another one is a investment into filling the statistics gap. We also need to monitor the efficiency, the effectiveness of state support programs. Second is access to funding. I mentioned already that financing remains limited, but it differs depending on the size of the enterprise. There are some state subsidies, state support, but they are mainly going toward the larger enterprises. The alternative financial instruments are underdeveloped, but there has been quite a bit of progress in this regard. But I believe that the main issue here is the high level of informality of such minor enterprises that hinders their access to funding. The third block is the competitiveness and EU alignment compliance. The compliance costs are really high. So this needs to be taken into account, and this needs to be discussed to find ways to enable this alignment, like progressive alignment, and filling the gaps gradually, especially at the level of small and medium enterprises. Lack of understanding and knowledge on foreign market opportunities and preferences and requirements. That's another one. Also, there is a lack of cooperation and aggregation between small and medium farmers that may really benefit from this cooperation and be more visible on external markets. And lastly, we are looking at the recovery and climatic sustainability. Of course, war damages continue to constrain production capacity, and today daily we are observing the increase in the scale of damage. We already are aware of the figure of 82 billion euro of damages. Secondly, irrigation infrastructure remains outdated and it remains underfunding. There are some progressive shifts, but it still requires lots of investment and focus. And there are also climate risks and water scarcity risks that need to be covered in order to increase the competitiveness of the sector. And finally, the fourth section will be dedicated to the enablers for sustainable development. So how can we increase the system of management and institutional capacity? So firstly, it's the technical support in order to increase the institutional potential. Of course, there is not sufficient effort, but also there must be some targeted support for IKE implementation. We understand that this will take time, this will take resources, and we need to think of how at a different level, at the national level, the regional, the community level, and the enterprise level, how can the support be provided. Then scaling and modernizing of agricultural data system. This is one of the key ones because we really need the data. How can we provide technical support when we're not able to understand where the gap is, where the demand is, how certain enterprises have suffered and which damage they sustained? Then the next block is the increase of access to funding. We have seen progress as regards engaging finance, but there must be a reorientation of state support from interest rate subsidies towards risk-sharing instruments. There were some pilot projects such as partial credit guarantee fund, but this is not sufficient. We need to move into the direction of increasing the volume of portfolio guarantees and consolidating military risks and crop insurance schemes. Then a diversification of instruments, meaning that there must be more financial instruments such as leasing, factoring, trade, and supply chains. And lastly, we must strive to strengthen financial transparency and advisory support for agri-food enterprises. There must be demand that's supported by the readiness and ability to use the new financial support tools. We will talk about those as well. The second block, the second concerns the support of the sector for development and competitiveness. We need to understand how can we use cooperation and all kinds of aggregation models or contract farming. How can we ensure a greater capacity of small and medium enterprises towards internationalization and competitiveness? We have seen the cases of Poland, Romania, and Bulgaria, so we can draw certain conclusions that will enable us to increase export potential and invest into the capacity of SMEs and maybe build on the experience of larger enterprises that are already leading in the commodity export, but are also technological leaders. So we need to really find ways to ensure the transfer of technology, facilitate EU market integration through intelligence and targeted support. That's another one that we already mentioned. And lastly, for today, we need to support and promote climate smart agriculture and sustainable land management. We need to look at, of course, demining, irrigation, technology development. So this is briefly what our study shows. Now we will move on towards the panel discussion. Thank you for your attention. Now let me give the floor to our esteemed guests. Today with us, we have a panel discussion that includes 4 participants. First is Denis Bashlik, the Deputy Minister, Giuseppe Aristei, the head of the Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry Unit at the EU delegation to Ukraine, Dmytro Kochen, Deputy Head of the All-Ukrainian Agrarian Council, and Oleg Serenko is the partner of private equity fund Diligent Capital Partners. Okay, the subject for discussion and the format is the following. We will have a few questions to the participants, after which every one of you will have a chance to ask your own questions. I mean, the participants from the audience and online. The online participants will also be able to raise their hand and ask a question or put it in the chat. So the first question goes out to Mr. Denis Bashlik. In spring, you called year 2026 a practical step towards the integration of common agricultural policy with the launch of the payment agency and the digital systems. Today, it's already end of summer. What is the progress in this regard in the implementation of the plans? What is already working as a pilot implementation? What can we focus on?
Thank you so much for the question. Actually, the payment agency is one of the biggest priorities of the Ministry of Economy. And in the future, the Ministry of the Agricultural Policy to ensure full-blown work of the payment agency, you have to adopt several regulatory acts. This year they are about to be adopted, but you also need to strengthen the capacity of the payment agency itself. According to the preliminary assessment, we need to hire more than 150 people, which represent a challenge, and we also need to increase the budget to keep the systems up and running, like FSDN, AKI, LPS, and the future IAX and others. And that is only the first step. After that, we have to obtain accreditation by the European Commission, which also takes quite a lot of time. The European Commission verifies everything, and if I'm not mistaken, it lasts for a year. So as soon as you apply for the accreditation, it will take you approximately 1 year. But it does not mean that Ukraine cannot work according to the principle of the payment agency. Before we receive access to funding, there are also pre-accession funds that you can use even without accreditation. So you have to apply for accreditation and cooperate with the European partners to succeed with this application. We have talked a lot about aligning the Ukrainian legislation with the European one, and we have made some progress. In some sectors, we are observing slow progress, in some rapid progress. In your opinion, what is the support that we need, or with what we need support the most, and how the European Union, the European delegation can be of help here? Thank you so much for such a good question. I believe that the European integration of the agricultural sector calls for the actions from the private businesses, from the businesses, and from the government. You have rightly mentioned that the most complicated work streams are the ones requiring a lot of funding, like welfare of the animals, like cattle, and we do understand it that we need to have a shared vision with businesses, especially when it comes to transitional periods, and we have to ensure stability for businesses. Then information matters. Everything that we are introducing or are planning to introduce has to be followed by an information campaign. You have mentioned a few things about the AKI, the system, or AKIs, the system that has to become like a window for our companies, honestly speaking, those who have to give this kind of knowledge, universities, high schools, do not really want to share their knowledge. So we have to work on this issue. And then, okay, the access is available. Do our farmers use it? Not really, because either they do not know about this opportunity or they do not want to use it. Yeah, people might lack motivation, and that is why they might not want to share their knowledge. Or some people um, are not ready to obtain this information and then put it into use. Any information will be really precious. Akis is the smallest of our problems. Then, when it comes to FSDN, it is very important for our state to have data not only at the macro but also micro levels. Akis is a great portal, looks really good. FSDN is a questionnaire consisting of 700 questions. Now you ask a farmer to answer 700 questions. He will not do that. In Europe, farmers receive some payment for doing the questionnaire, but unfortunately, we do not have such an opportunity today. So it is a two-way street. We would be grateful to the associations for their support, the All Ukrainian Agricultural Council, if we are successful with our initiatives, then the whole sector will perceive them in a positive way, and they will not think about how to impose additional sanctions. What about the technical assistance? Is it needed? Of course, we say that technical assistance is about human resources, people, and money. So even to implement the pilot project, you need to have more people. Again, in terms of FSDN, you need to find people who will be doing the surveys. You need to train the people, and to be able to scale up the pilot project, you need to have a lot of funding, which is not available in the state budget. So the sooner we pilot our projects, the sooner we will be part of the agricultural policy. But actually, we are not just waiting to see something, but we are trying to contribute to the formation of the common agricultural policy. Ukraine is a potential candidate and can participate in the discussions related to common agricultural policy. Now I would like to ask Giuseppe a few questions. We talked about the European integration.
From where we stand, what are the main constraints holding back Ukraine's agri-food sector? So this is a bit of a step back in our discussion. So we were speaking about EU accession. So I would like to a bit bring back this topic to the major challenges, and do we have certain alignment in our understanding of the major challenges and the understanding of the EU delegation?
So thank you very much. So you made a very interesting and comprehensive presentation. From that presentation, many of the elements that you have put forward, I would say all of them resonate to our understanding. Some are more evident, some other a little bit less, but for example, I mean, there is one point that the Deputy Minister mentioned about evidence data and evidence-based policy capacity. So the capacity of gathering the data from all the spectrum of the enterprises that we have out there. So big enterprises, medium, and also the small enterprises. And this will provide informed decisions to the policy maker. On this, we are working. By the way, constraints. We are talking about constraints. We are talking about opportunities that we are developing. All of them, on all of them, we are working. So, and I would say some with difficulty because, for example, if we're talking about constraints, war is a constraint, and actually that we didn't ask for, and we see it damages every day, and logistics is a constraint that actually today is much more evident because of the maritime, actually the grain export blockage and the maritime logistics that is actually stuck, and where the Ukraine is discover itself to be very dependent actually. So we need to work on it, and we are working on it. Other elements. Financing gaps. So the to provide support, financial support to the small enterprises, so those who are not have difficulty to access the credit is very important. And we are trying to move from the so-called simple interest rate subsidies to something more, which is guarantee, which is insurance, crop insurances, leasing. But I would say what is important and where we are working and we need to work and we need to improve is to make possible that the small enterprises that have good ideas can progress and can access credit. Today is not always the same, the case. The most heard word is collateral. You need collateral, you need guarantees, and that's where we are working, but it's something that we keep working, and we need to progress. And of course, the EU alignment gaps, and also the legal harmonization is something, and then the implementation is something we are working on. And you made a very interesting slides on this, full slides of details on this and different areas of the legal harmonization where we need to work on. I will not take long on this. So.
Yeah, indeed, this is a very long list of tasks in terms of EU accession, and now from one side we are balancing between like recovery from full-scale war and actually leaving the war now, and the Ukrainian agrarian sector is I don't know, significantly damaged. And it still needs to have some access to finance, access to markets, access to knowledge, to some other means of I don't know, support. But at the same time, EU accession that actually creates a significant opportunity for an access to the by far the largest market globally, combined with harmonization of Ukraine's legislation to EU acquis. And there are a lot of tasks. So what could be your take on the most important tasks? What would be the priority tasks, and how you can help here in this bilateral talks?
Yeah, you mentioned the big challenge is to quantify the compliance cost for the small and medium enterprises. The big enterprises have capacity of finding their own way within the most efficient way to address additional costs, while for the small and medium enterprises is more complicated. And why it is important for us? Because the public support needs to turn into those who are small, who are in need of public, of being accompanied, being, let's say, driven to a more competitive environment. So in this respect, your study is, I would say, a starting point where there are elements that needs to be deepened in order to provide and quantify the cost of the accession in a way in a different sector, and especially for the small enterprises. It's about standard. It's about as I think Dennis mentioned the DCFTA, or maybe in the introductory part, Taras actually. So standards needs to comply, and there are agreements that needs to be met by 2028. We need to work on it, and data strengthening, data and information data system is something you actually spoke very long, and it's exactly what we need to do. We are doing. There is something in that we are working on roadmaps, and so we have gone through the accession in different areas and so-called chapters of the accession. The chapter I'm more familiar is agriculture rural development, which is chapter 11. In chapter 11, there are 3 priorities: paying agency, you mentioned, Dennis, IACS, which is the integrated administration and control systems, and monitoring and control mechanisms. These 3 elements are very connected. Some of them requires more different degrees of ingredients, I would say. Some of them requires more expertise and people. Some other more high technical knowledge and capacity of processing data. This is a process ongoing. And
this is just chapter 11.
Chapter 11,
we also have chapter 12, which is even more complicated.
Me into chapter 12, which is not my chapter, but of course. So chapter 12 is very much about standards and meeting the standards. Food safety and consumer protection is extremely. Sorry, thank you. Food safety and consumer protection is extremely and is an important chapter of the accession, and it's the most tricky and complicated legally and from the implementation point of view, because it affects the economy. It affects heavily the capacity of the enterprises from the large spectrum, from the small to the largest, to access credit market. Sorry. So yes, it's a challenge that we are daily working on. From the RADA to the government, who is approving bylaws, and the European Commission checking and helping on this respect.
How do you see what could be the realistic expectations of Ukrainian agrarian sector from EU accession in the coming years? So in terms of
very tricky question, because you know we are all working for one goal, which is accessing the European Union. So, and we are bound by our rules, and we are genuinely putting all our efforts, I would say 100% of our time in this endeavor. And I see it happening in the government that is very often struggling with a shortage of people, and our side, we are trying to do our efforts, putting, of course, the technical assistance where it is needed, and asking also sometimes where it is needed the most. So the goal is clear. The time is dictated by our I would say, roadmaps that we have agreed together. So let's progress. Let's continue to work.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Giuseppe, for a very overarching and comprehensive speech. Now I'd like to pass the floor to Dmitro. Dmitro, ви представляєте найбільшу асоціацію.
Dmitro, you represent the biggest association of the all Ukrainian Agricultural Council. Giuseppe talked a lot about the cost of accession. We also talked about the opportunities of accession. Let's start off with this small question. To what extent understand, do businesses understand what the European integration means to them? The challenges, opportunities, if they have a good understanding of it?
Dear colleagues, hello. Yeah, actually, this is very much to the point. Talking about the small and medium enterprises, the farmers, for them, European integration is half a mystical process. All of us understand that there are some political decisions of our people as to become part of the European Union, but I will not be overly optimistic and promising that this will happen in year 2028, but we are on the path and we will walk this path. But all of the farmers understand that the European Union and the agriculture climate in the EU is different. A lot of it linked to the Green Deal, lots of limitations in terms of the policies and approaches to production. Everyone understands that this will require change, but what I have seen in your presentation is that there is lack of comprehensive understanding what it will cost. I mean, what it will take in terms of money and what they will get for the cost. The farmers are not quite aware, so they are walking blindly towards a happy European future, but we do not fully understand what this bright European future has for us. We like all of us have still not done our homework in this regard. So we need to really estimate the challenges, the cost, and the advantage. So it's not, we do not need to just start running towards the European Union or maybe not move there at all. No, this is something that is awaiting us, but we need to enter this process strongly. We should not lose our competitive edge like our colleagues displayed today. For example, for me, it was quite a surprise to discover the fact that part of the plant production is decreasing, but in the general economy, the share of the agriculture will be growing as a result of the full-scale invasion. Unfortunately, and the reason I say unfortunately is because we're not at the moment in the place to grow corporations like Apple, which of course we would be nice to have. But at the moment, our strong side is agriculture. And talking specifically about me, as a union, we did our own research and survey as regards to pesticides and plant protection. There's Vlad sitting here in the audience who assisted with the survey. And this is something really specific. The specific figure is 2.5 billion lost by the farmers yearly as a result of the transition to the approved list of chemical pesticides. And this is the loss sustained by the increased alternative cost, the increased cost of the alternative chemicals. So we compared those that we had with the list of the EU. So about 100 of them are forbidden in the EU. So if we cancel those, the losses will be 2.5 billion yearly. So and if we look specifically at the crops, if we look at rapeseed, so the Germans really like our rapeseed. For the rapeseed, the losses will be $100 per hectare after the change, after the shift towards using the approved pesticides. This is to confirm what I'm saying, that the European Union accession is a mystery for many farmers. For at least for pesticides, we kind of lifted the curtain a little bit. And what I mean to say is that there is so much more to explore and so much more to research, so that we really base our roadmap on the factual, evidence-based data. because this will be the data that will enable us to know what kind of funding will be required. How can the farmers be supported during this way? Maybe we can also talk about certain deadlines, but the only way we can start this process is when having already specific figures and information. So on the one hand, we have already started the path, but on the other hand, we're really lacking understanding. Thank you so much for going back to one of the first slides about the shifting role of the agricultural sector in the general economy. It's very often where it's mentioned that there must be a transition from commodity to processing, but statistically, we have not seen any change. So the share of low marginal crops still remains, and that's understandable. Could you please explain how can we change the export structure? How can we, like, what are we facing? What are the obstacles? What are the small and medium enterprises lacking money or human resource? Or, for example, you mentioned the pesticides. It's not directly linked to the processing, but maybe there are other obstacles. Oh, well, I believe that it's very evident, actually. Um, I'm enjoying this event so much. I did not want to mention like bad things, but still, we first that we need to do is to launch the export. Since the 22nd of July, the export is on hold. In Odessa. So Dunai is half empty, Danube is half empty. The bridges are being shelled. I'm not here to be negative, but we went to a meeting where the colleagues, for those that the using the elevators and the agricultural large exporters, they need to prepare. So that was actually a threat for them. So we all understand the situation we're in. Year 2022, if we look at the balance and the statistics, it was much better than now, because today we have a record-breaking stock of grain. We have exported less than we had to. We have a stock still. So we have accumulated this leftover stock, and also we have really good yield this year. Luckily, the yield is very good. And now, what do we do with the grain? Mr. Denis, here, I want to thank the Cabinet of Ministers, because there are some measures being taken. Of course, it is not sufficient to cover this gap, but I see that there's lots of effort in terms of the loan provision and insurance, and the National Bank also is engaged. They made some incentives, but I'm not really daring to think about processing. The first point is to assure the export. I mean, export what we have. Of course, no one expected that your survey would be available at this time now, but I think that the key challenge now is, of course, the war. Yesterday, Mr. Ruslan is here. We had a 2-hour discussion with the colleagues as per the processing and how it can be done. But the key thing is, of course, the money. We all understand. Take Poland. It's a beautiful example. Let me disagree, actually, about the fact that the Poland performed so well because they worked with the small family farms. I think that that is not due to this fact. They actually bet on huge processing capacity, and this is what works when production is compensated by a huge efficiency of processing. If you take dairy products, for example, Mlekovita processes more than all of our dairy plants process daily. So processing is really linked to volume. We have our own spheres and niches where we can go, but this is the process that will be ongoing. But the first thing is the mic working? Yes, I'm sorry if I'm taking too long, but really war and war risks is something to consider. But actually, any big processing, I just had a meeting with a big business for damages, Epicenter, Nova Poshta, Rosetka. It's crazy. The damages sustained after the shelling are unbelievable. I will not be telling you the figures. Some companies have already managed to overcome some of the challenges, but this is huge. So the risks are unbelievable. So if we talk about processing, how much does it cost? $200 million. So war risks are actually coming on the forefront. I believe that huge processing can be part of the Marshall Plan, the recovery plan of Ukraine. But unfortunately, while the hostilities are lasting, especially in the escalated phase, the way it is now, we need to at least preserve what we have. Colleagues were asking yesterday, international donors were asking, what do we need to support? Which cluster of processing do we need to invest into? How can we lift the load of the export routes? So we had a 2-hour discussion, and we concluded that we need to support what already is there, keep it safe, and after the war is finished, we can solicit the funds. So because when it comes to processing, it's very simple. Yeah, thank you so much. Well, the microphone is definitely on all the time, so don't be concerned. So the only thing that was turned off was the clicker that I had in my hands. The microphones are on all the time because there will be the second part of discussion, which will, of course, be also very valuable. We are not here trying to build sandcastles or do some wishful thinking. We really want to be realistic, to talk about something that we will be able to follow through. We all understand the elephant in the room. The war risks, of course, are standing in the way. It's a problem number one. We have been living in this set for about 10 years and even more. So we need to keep resilient, we need to keep sustainable, and we need a support. And of course, it is linked to logistics, access to funding, and also how the logistic corridors have been changing. The role of ports also was changing. But for commodity markets, of course, it's extremely important. The transportation corridors over to the European Union also need to be adjusted to the modern day challenges. The support of our neighboring countries is, of course, very relevant for this, but this is not the subject of today's conversation. Let me ask this final question to you. Mr. Denis mentioned that we need to work more with small and medium farmers. The resource is not sufficient to communicate with everyone. What can be the role of the associations like yours in this process in terms of awareness raising, communication, and getting their demand as to enable them to share their challenges or their level of readiness? Just a couple of minutes still. Yeah, I'll be brief. Us as the association, the initiatives mentioned by Mr. Denis, and this survey will be happy to contribute as regards Akis. It's been a couple of weeks ago that we also uploaded there lots of information materials, and we will keep that information updated. Well, associations are faster, and associations can really be focused on the changes so they can be really aware. And of course, it's very easy for me to communicate a message towards all of the participants of our association. So we will be happy to be one of the media for sharing information, but also we are willing to help from the expert and mentorship perspective. I mentioned the survey of pesticides. And also, if you talk about the All Ukrainian Agrarian Council, we are now researching the subject of Euro integration. And of course, we will have to coordinate this activity with the ministry. But generally speaking, every person and every agrarian association in Ukraine are willing to support the ministry. And I want to thank my colleagues because I really do owe them appreciation, because over the few years since the full-scale invasion, I've seen that the ministry has become very inclusive. There are lots of meetings taking place, lots of validation, lots of discussion. So we are willing to stay informational partners and to help where we can. Of course, we also have limited capacity, but where we have the capacity, we are willing to contribute. Thank you so much. So now let us move on to our next speaker. I mentioned that we have two main goals. First, talk about competitiveness, and second is talk about Ukraine facility. Mr. Oleg is the partner of the fund Diligent Capital Partners that was just recently launching the huge program that's called Food for Impact, and will be supporting agro producers, processors in Ukraine. We're talking a lot about the challenges and the war risks. That, of course, is the main in Ukraine, but also what is the really the really substantial bottleneck on from your point of view? Is it risk insurance, or the horizon of access, or lack of qualified workforce? How would you range these challenges, that the issues that the agricultural sector is facing that are blocking investment? Okay, thank you for your question. Well, honestly speaking, the bottleneck is here in Kiev is the investment funds that should be investing more and potentially be better coordinated with Kiev and Brussels, because Ukraine investment facility is created with billions of euro, and part of it is aimed at investing into Ukrainian economy, but unfortunately, most of the money is still in Brussels and it never reaches the processing facilities. And our job with Food for Impact is actually aimed at bringing the money from Brussels to the Ukrainian producers, the processing facilities, because there are lots of projects, there are lots of qualified workforce. The people are there to implement the projects. I believe that the 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 people that are engaged in this kind of activity are exempt from military service, so the people are there. So I'm talking primarily about the mid-size over to larger companies. This is our area. We have already had consultations with about 100 companies, and dozens of them are actually waiting for us to give them 5 to 15 million euros so that they can increase the scope and the volume of their processing capacity. And here I want to support the statement of the previous speaker. We're not talking about launching something new. We do not want to build something new on barren field. No, there we do already have dozens of processors, producers that are already working. They just want to increase the scope and the volume. And also there are companies that have trading expert, and they want to process part of the exported commodities because they have potential clients for the produced for the processed products. Of course, at the moment, the operational capital is relevant, not only the capital investment, because of course workforce is something that's still being lost. There must be some investment into long-term work capital. We see that banks are working. The program 579 is working. The feedback is may vary from various producers, but I believe that on average it's still functioning in the market, but at the level of the mid producer, they are not able to implement a large scale project, and this sector is actually suffering the most because the companies that have access to international funding, the huge agricultural holdings, they are getting the funding. Those that can work directly with the EBRD, with dozens of millions of euro of investments, they are struggling, but enable to grow the mid-size enterprises. We need to bring money from Brussels over to Ukraine, and not specifically Kiev, but the regions too.
You mentioned 100 companies, 10 of them you are considering more seriously. Yes, we communicated with more than 100 companies, and tens of them are ready to go in right now. Of course, we cannot provide funding to 100 companies, but we can do 15 companies. Hopefully, we will launch another foundation and will fund another 15 companies. But actually, you can achieve a lot. Yes, like there are 10, 15 companies that will succeed and some of them that will not. How do you understand that this or that company will not succeed? What do they have to improve to be more prepared? Uh, is it more about visibility or ideas or absence of a business case? When or how do you understand that a company still has to do some homework? The Actually, we have 100 companies eligible for the funding. We need to expand the Ukraine facility. It's a myth that Ukraine does not have bankable projects. If you just Google like bankable projects in Ukraine, of course, you will not find anything. But if you go to the regions in Ukraine, you talk to the entrepreneurs, of course, you will see that every region has at least like 20 companies which could benefit from funding. Of course, there are some enterprises that can access funding in 5 years. Maybe now they are lacking in the institutional level, or maybe they do not need that much funding now. But to say that we are very different or that we are speaking different languages, I cannot say that. Maybe we could proceed with the questions from the audience. Please briefly introduce yourself.
My question's addressed to Giuseppe Ariste. Thanks for your time, first of all. With all the risks we're facing, my question is about the potential export routes for grain. As an agricultural limited liability company, with the current state of logistics, with the ports being a risk for both drivers and the grain, with the railway route being way more expensive this month. and you know, all the border crossings uncertainties, what would be a direction to look at for exports of corn, maize corn, for example, in large quantities?
Thank you. We are facing a big crisis at the moment, and we are very aware the ministry is doing the maximum possible to sensitize all the community of partners. We are part of it, actually. And today there is a meeting in the delegation led by and chaired by the minister himself with some of the main partners, and actually is a EU coordination plus other main donors. The crisis that came after the heavy attack of the 22nd of July display that we have a heavy limitation of logistics that we need to address. We in the past addressed it through the to the solidarity lanes. We need to now think what to do, and we are working hands-on on this. And because actually the Danube is very low, so there is a even the Danube is difficult to be used at the moment. All the member states will be there this afternoon, and there will be and things are very urgent, understood, and some temporary measures are already studied and for which we are gathering fast-track resources. Other in the midterm meaning the before the year. So the short term is within the harvest time by November, and then the next it will be. Dennis, I'm actually stepping into your I'm sorry, it was directed to me, but I could have dropped it to you actually. But actually, no, we are working hands-on and side by side in this.
Appreciate your honest answer.
Дякуємо дуже. Можливо, наступне запитання.
Thank you. The next question.
Сергій Шилко, займаюсь підбором
Sergey
технологій.
Shilko, I am responsible for technology specialists. So as of now, what kind of programs do we have in Ukraine that help hire qualified human resources in Ukraine? And probably a question to Giuseppe, are there any opportunities to make use of young people who have left for abroad and allow them to cooperate with Ukraine remotely to put up with this situation?
So thank you very much. And if I understand correctly, how to attract young resources, young people, and actually this is something that we need in all sector, in all areas, at the institutional level. How to engage the research and academia community, which is full of resources, and how to attract them. Young people, not only because academia, you know, is made about people that are there for a long time, and also people that want to put their ideas and sometimes also their dream being real. So this is a research component. The European Union has a volet of research. I know that my colleagues are working on the Horizon is one of the let's say program that are being put forward for the research, for the cooperation research. I would say that this is one of the horizon in which but not the program, but the horizon in which we are working on. And I picked on one provocative point that was made before, when we were saying we are looking for a happy European future. Actually, we are not promising a happy European future. We are promising a common future that would not less left anybody behind, because you know, we are in a world that is in trouble at the moment, and we are all coping with this. And but coping together is far the best way to go ahead. So also in this kind of things, we are putting in place tools. I cannot mention the tools because it's a research tools component, or research, or in innovation, and areas where other colleagues are more competent than me. In the agriculture sector, I don't know, Denise, do you want to comment on this?
Ну, насправді, якщо говорити про щось нове, там не
Speaking of some new things, then there are plenty of international projects. We have a lot of agricultural companies introducing courses on reskilling, taking into consideration a lack of human resources, and we admit that it's true. We just need to have a desire to get engaged into the sector. Different, you know, dear colleagues, there are no options. The ministry and the government does not possess the resources to fix all the problems. Businesses have to take over and start cooperating with educational institutions. There is a school course delivered in more than 150 schools. There is a course for the children in the secondary school, which explains that agriculture is not only about cows or working really yourself into the ground, that it is a really promising sector. So businesses actually finance the books for these children, some other projects provide funding to pay salaries to teachers. Honestly speaking, it is not that popular to work in the sector of agriculture. That is why our children need to see that it's kind of appealing at school. Last year, we started cooperating with the Uman Agricultural University, and hopefully next year we will be implementing some joint programs. At least once per week, our representatives deliver lectures to the students, and now we are trying to figure out how to deepen that kind of cooperation. Actually, human resources is the biggest issue for now. Our businesses have to work directly with educational facilities. Thank you. I would like to give the floor to our colleagues online. Dear colleagues, if you have questions, please raise your hands and you will be given the floor. We have two comments offline. Who was the first? Thank you. My name is Katarina. I represent the Embassy of Netherlands. One of the sector is fruit and vegetable growing and food security. I have a question that is not that much related to this study because it's focused mainly on export. I myself observed a warehouse in Chaika last year, and you know, I'm a bit skeptical about scaling up logistics. Yesterday, I bought apples just from people on the street because there were no apples in supermarkets. I have a question for Metro. are you considering any proposals for the international donors when it comes to food security? Because Russians will still be hunting for our warehouses, for our foods, and actually we are very close to the point in time when you are not able to buy certain foodstuffs in certain regions in Ukraine. I will start answering the question and then will pass to Denise. Thank you so much. You have rightly mentioned that our internal logistics represents a problem that will be aggravated. And actually, we can feel the cumulative effect of the events already now. Is it is the restoration of the system that we had was effective or not? I can't tell you because we cannot protect all these facilities. Whether there is an alternative, there is an option like using some mobile warehouses. All the donors that we contact with are fully aware of the situation. Do they understand where to invest money? Of course they do. Are they strongly committed to doing that? I cannot tell you that yes, like definitely, because people understand the whole situation, the fact that outdated systems are not viable anymore and you have to invest in new ones, but we still keep in touch with our donors on a daily basis and do our best. Another question from our audience offline. Hello, my name is Hannah. I represent the Animals Health Committee, European Business Association. My topic is really narrow. I represent the Veterinary Committee, and it sounds unusual, but still it has a daily effect on farmers. We talked about institutional capacity, which is one of our biggest triggers as rules and then the trainings by the EU specialists for our inspectors, I mean Ukrainians. Is there any work done when it comes to recognizing European certificates, and whether there are any trainings conducted for our instructor, for our inspectors? Before the law 206, we did not have any institutions like the ones that have already been mentioned. But now we have to actually establish them. Thank you so much for the question. As of now, we have quite an effective project funded by the EU, and there we analyze what can be recognized and what cannot. If it can be, then how to do it in within a simplified procedure. Honestly, when you mentioned the trainings, I really can resonate with this. This is something that we have to work on. There are 3 specialists, 2 of them are ready to share their knowledge and experience, and the third one said that they were not interested in this. So here we will be again working together with our European colleagues. Giuseppe, the floor is yours.
As Denise mentioned, there is a team of experts, so-called ILCA, or today called EU for Safer Food. Is 60 people. Some of them experts, some key experts, some other temporary experts. So all of them are working on different activities, partially legislation, partially trainings. They're working hands in hand with the Agency for Food and Safer Consumer Protection. So for a specific question that you have, you find my name, you address it to me, and I will find the way to get back to you or put you in contact with the specific training that is needed. But definitely is an entire work that is ongoing at the moment. So I'm sure that there are trainings planned or already ongoing.
Так, дякуємо дуже. Останній шанс для запитань.
Okay, thank you so much. Now, if you have another question, please use this chance because now we are going to let go our panelists, Mr. Bashlik, Giuseppe Aristei, Dmitro Kochan, Oleg Sirenko. Let's give them a round of applause. Okay, thank you so much also for facilitating this discussion. We are facing lots of challenges. We're working on them, and let us keep up the good work. Thank you so much. Really, talking about, like, if we want to summarize briefly, we talked about EU integration of the agricultural sector. EU integration is not one reform, it's a set of actions that concern institutional capacity, access to funding, and also recovery in Ukraine. For Ukraine, this process is not similar to other countries, and our path will be different. So we need to be aware of how we want to proceed and how we want to do it with account of the risks and challenges that we face daily, but also we want to smoothly progress towards EU, maybe not so slowly, but maybe faster. But the question here is, how do we increase the preparedness of the sector? Communication is key. So we talked a lot about participatory approach, about how we can better engage the representatives of business. The ministry plays a significant role, the Ministry of Agrarian Policy, but also the Ministry of Economy, since it is also one of the key bodies that's a key participant of Ukraine facility. So today is just the beginning, like Mr. Giuseppe told us. So there will be a continuation towards this. We also have a practical part to today's event. We presented briefly the survey, but then the second part will be dedicated to subject discussions. There will be 4 groups. So now let us thank our participants, and I'll give the floor to my colleague Vadim that will tell you about what we will be working on the second part of our day.
Дякую, Дмитро. Насправді зараз нас
Thank you, Dmitro. Actually, we had a coffee break planned, but before we do that, let me tell you briefly what we have next as part of today's event. We want to hold 4 thematic workshops. The subjects will be access to markets, access to funding, and access to information and knowledge, and the regulatory environment. We divided all of the participants who were registered between the groups. So kindly find your name in the group so that you are aware to which one you belong. If you cannot find your name among those listed, you can choose the group that you like. So now we will have this coffee break, and after 30 minutes, we are looking forward to having you back here in this room, where we will tell you how the workshops will be conducted, what would be the expectations, what you can expect from us, what we would expect from you. So we'll give it another hour of group work. Colleagues that joined us online, my colleague Nastya will send into the Zoom chat a link to 4 groups. You're welcome to join one that feels more relevant and more interesting for you. Our colleagues, moderators online, will make sure that you are there. The only limit is that the workshops will be in Ukrainian for online participants. So this is the limitation that we unfortunately have, but hopefully you can still enjoy the time. So now, why don't you have a coffee, have a refreshment, and at 12:20, please come back to proceed with our event today.
ще Арсенія десь немає. Арсеній вже є? Вже є? Так? А, давай починати. Колеги, ми попросимо вас
Dear colleagues,
потрошки
please
сісти, бо ми будемо
return to
починати
your
фінальну
seats
сесію
because
нашої
we
події,
are
де ми
to
будемо
start our
обмінюватися
final
напрацюваннями
session
всіх наших робочих
and
груп. Тому
share all your
почнемо з
ideas
господаринки.
that
Дам
emerged in
слово
your
Мирославу.
working groups. And I would like to give the floor to
Я тут
Miroslav.
згадав, що я ще мав вибрати якогось
I
волонтера, який мав би
remembered
це презентувати.
that I
Вирішив,
had
що
to
це буду
choose
робити я.
a
Так записали,
volunteer
то я
to
буду презентувати.
present
Глобально в
all of
нас
this,
можна?
but I will do that, okay?
Глобально в нас
So,
було три таких ключових виклики, які ми
globally,
розглядали.
we
Це
had
питання дефіциту
three
ринкової інформації, в принципі, де оця точка
challenges.
де має
The
опинитися
lack
продукція
of
того чи іншого виробника.
information
Друге, це
about
питання, як дійти від точки А
markets,
тут в Україні до точки
then
Б там за кордоном.
how
І
to
третє питання це те, власне, сертифікація,
a-
яка теж стоїть у нас на
reach
цьому шляху.
the.
Коли ми обговорювали проблематику,
When we
яке ми
discussed the
підсвітили ще
problems,
додатково, це
the
питання
issues,
логістики,
we
що, власне,
also
є
mentioned
непрофесійніші
the
це питання
issue of
такого десь не те, що
logistics because
нематеріального, але більш такого
other
інформаційного доступу,
problems,
питання
other
логістики, тому
issues
треба
are
стандартизацію
more
власне
about
та міжнародний ринок. І
access
тому ми, в принципі,
to
в кінці кінців
information
обговорювали
and
ще його додатково.
logistics. It's more
Якщо
about
говорити про
physical,
якесь
real
уточнення
access.
глобально,
Speaking of
там суттєвих коригувань до самих формулювань викликів не було, тому я відразу перейду до того, а що
so there were no
планується зробити для того,
challenges
щоб
regarding the
впливати на кожен
like
з викликів.
global
Питання
picture,
дефіциту ринкової
but what we
інформації,
can
то,
do
як ми
with the
говорили,
lack
і майже
of
дійшли консенсусу, що такої інформації
market information,
цитую дофіга.
we
В принципі, коли, якщо хто захоче, той,
reached
в
a
принципі, може
conclusion
і собі
that
отримати його,
there
ніяких
are
проблем
lots
з
of
доступом, в принципі, немає.
data, a lot of information.
Прозвучала
At the
ініціатива
same
третього створення,
time,
бо вона по факту є
there
на базі
was an
доступу
idea
до
not
сервісу, на базі є
to
бізнес.
create, but
Точка входу, єдина база інформаційна, і питання її якимось чином, дорозвивати, щоб,
probably
власне, і
we
робиться
could
на постійній основі,
develop the
але питання
information
також додатково
system
популяризувати. І тому ми, в принципі,
and
розглядали як окрему історію. Це питання
promote it.
такого лінку оцієї, власне, платформи і доступу до інформації про
We need
експорт
to
з
link the platform
державним
and
реєстром,
the
оскільки там в
access
аграрії в нас є
to
великий
information
потенціал,
with the
потенційно
state
може бути
register
зацікавлений в тому, щоб
because actually
експортувати.
there are many
Тому, маючи, по
people
суті,
who
якийсь там
could be
інформаційний
interested
ресурс,
in
людей багато
exporting
всього,
goods.
і пул людей, які
So
потенційно
the
можуть цим
information
користуватися, і тому
resource
їх не
could be
поєднати
really
між собою, не
beneficial. We have
використовувати далі
people who
як
could make good
темплейти
use of
у
it,
такий
and
датасет
I think
людей,
that
тому ця
we
інформація
can
може бути
bring them
цікава і
together
таким чином
and
давати їм додану вартість. Що, в принципі, така максимально
provide
проста,
them with
зрозуміла
the
і
added
дієва ініціатива, яка
value.
не вимагає, в
That
принципі, майже
is
жодних
an
зусиль,
initiative
просто
that
питання там рівня
does
між
not
інституціями.
require
Початкова
any
історія, яка в нас виникла, коли ми говорили
big
про,
efforts.
власне, питання
Another
перше, але
thing
воно так
that
на межі, мабуть, першого і
emerged
другого, це те,
was
що там прозвучала
that
теза, що, в принципі, досить часто, власне,
it
міжнародні
is
компанії
often the
звертаються
case that
конкретно там
international
до посольств з питанням того, що
enterprises
окей, нам
reach
треба
out
якісь
to the
партнери в
embassies
Україні. І, відповідно, здебільшого для того,
searching
щоб
for
цей процес
partners
десь
in
трошечки
Ukraine
пришвидшити і мати впевненість
to
в тому, що
speed up this
відгукнеться хтось з України,
process
то,
and make
власне, такою
sure
точкою
that
входу для
they
цих
recommend
міжнародних
good
партнерів стають
partner.
асоціації. І питання
Probably
того, наскільки асоціації
there should
здатні
be some
реагувати на такий запит,
associations
в тому числі якимись
created,
міжнародними
but
партнерами.
here
І,
the
власне, питання
question
того,
is
щоб їх
whether
там розвивати і
associations are
досягати таких
ready
результатів. Відповідно,
to
тут таких дві
do
складові.
this
Якщо це
kind
асоціації,
of
які
work.
складаються з
So
таких
there are
середніх спроможних
two
виробників, то, мабуть, це питання такої бізнесової стратегії самих
components:
виробників, і це питання
business
додаткових там
strategy
невеликих внесків
of
чи питання до
producers
асоціації,
and
яка
probably
структурує,
some
власне,
contributions, but it's
проекти,
more a
наскільки такий
question
бізнесовий доступ стати
to
більш
the
комфортним, чи це питання
association
там
about
керівників
how
асоціацій
they
більш інших виробників,
handle
і це
these
важливо питання теж і
contributions.
фінансування з боку держави. Коли ми говоримо про другу історію, про
Speaking
другу
of
історію, це про
another
використання процедур
thing
міжнародного
that
ринку,
is
то в цілому ми здебільшого
lack of knowledge
сфокусувалися,
about
власне,
how
саме
to
на питаннях
enter
ринку. Тобто не як
markets.
там
So
виїхати
we
з складу в
focused
Україні,
more
перетнути кордон, а
on
те, куди ми
how,
потрапляємо, і, власне, хто нас
where to
продукцію
go,
купує. І
and
тут в нас
who
була така
usually purchases our product. So we have some things to think about, like we could develop a network of local ambassadors abroad. You know, when a Ukrainian recommends another Ukrainian enterprise to other colleagues from abroad, it works, but if they receive recommendations from their people, I guess that they will have more trust. And I would actually link it to the fact that there should be an official office abroad, not just like an embassy. And these two components would bring a lot of benefits. And actually, these maybe another thing that is hard to implement but necessary is temporary warehouses. I mean, if it's really hard to transport goods in small portions, in small batches, probably we could establish centralized warehouses owned by the state or co-financed by businesses could solve this problem, but it requires more consideration. Looking at some separate certificates, there is nothing difficult, but you have to treat every case on an individual basis. So actually, it could be about access to funding if the certification is expensive, but we actually decided to point out that there have to be intergovernmental agreements between different countries so that we could overcome certain barriers that might arise. And in terms of logistics, there isn't one solution, but again, it could be insurance that has to be there in place. And the next point is not an initiative, but just like a thought. We should focus on logistics. For instance, the ports were blocked, and now we have the same kind of problems again. So probably we have to take a more systematic and forward-looking approach. That is it, and I would like to give the floor to another group. Thank you, Yaroslav. I will continue with access to financing. I do not have such a beautiful board, so I will be presenting without it. Just I will ask to show the slide with financing. Thank you. So we talked about the three issues in terms of financing, that much about underdeveloped and high level of informal economy, which affects limited access to funding and to using different financial tools, instruments. Again, it could be different, but it is really relevant to small enterprises. Our team has such proposals. to inform, build the trust, and encourage producers to shift to more acceptable ways of doing business, and they might want to do it with the help of the stakeholders which close cooperate with the producers, or these stakeholders, they are the best at communicating, at conveying information. Successful stories work the best. I mean, the stories of those enterprises that accessed funding, invested into their business, and managed to increase their volumes. So as for limited funding issue, the key problem is whether money is present. Again, I'm not talking about the conditions of the program 579, but first and foremost, this initiative is for donors. There is a need to make currency loans more available, or make them available for the enterprises with a higher level of risks. And we also focused on ensuring war related risks, which is really relevant during the war. This was introduced by the Ministry of Economy. Unfortunately, this money is not enough to cover the entire needs. So our group reached the conclusion that it is the government that has to take responsibility for that and probably administer different insurance tools against war-related risks. Now I would like to give the floor to the colleagues who worked on access to information. I take it that Yaroslava will take the floor.
Доброго дня, мене звати
Hello,
Ярослава.
dear colleagues. I'm Yaroslava. I represent the All Ukrainian Association of Communities and Farmers. I represent a team which analyzed the challenges in relation to access to information. I believe that information allows make good decisions which are true to life and to have some impact. The first challenge is the lack of consolidated data at the level of farms. That is a challenge that everyone is faced with. There is no good information which farmers provide voluntarily. That is a barrier that does not allow all these institutions cooperate, implement great projects together, and combat all the challenges we are faced with. There is the agrarian register. It is being filled with information. So there is a request and the ministry provides the resources to fill that register with information. But again, it is not enough because there isn't enough integration with the other resources. So in this case, we propose the following steps to develop this infrastructure, fill it through different channels, because actually you cannot uh, appoint a certain structure responsible for that. So we could encourage the municipalities. We can also divide those functions and roles between the administrators responsible for other ministries. And speaking of farmers, the best information, all the necessary information lies with the farmer. I'm, as a lawyer, am faced with such pushback from farmers. They have no trust and no motivation to provide information. So you need to motivate farmers and businesses to provide this kind of information by regulating the regulatory acts related to assistance and subsidies to the businesses. I'm not talking about the Держstat now. So we can regulate that only businesses that do this or that can receive aid. So farmers need to be stimulated, motivated. Only then they will be providing the necessary information. I mean, if it doesn't happen in the future, then there is no point in implementing projects and things like that. So businesses also do not have to perceive DAR as a single platform consolidating information that could be used against them in court. So you have to explain that it is for their benefit, for the benefit of their enterprises. Of course, ministries can engage other institutions, they can delegate some powers to other institutions, but just one institution has to bear the responsibility.
Also, we mentioned that we would like to delegate this to the communities and, of course, to expand the functionality of the state agrarian registry, because this could be a one-stop shop for the opportunities for information dissemination and for the dialogue between the stakeholders and the institutions that are part of this chain. Then it's access to the evidence-based information. Once again, the access is not there because we do not get the relevant data. We highlighted here that the entity responsible for this line must be the state statistics service, so that all the information that's transmitted via account, the reporting mechanism, it needs to be open so that it can be evaluable, at least the information that the farmer is willing to share. So these data need to be open. This really would facilitate our job. Then the relevant changes to the legislature need to be made, and the farmer engagement. At every stage, farmers need to be engaged, even if it requires some aggressive marketing and promotion. This is something that needs to be done. Then challenge 3 is the informational lack at the level of business. We already heard the stand of the state bodies and the private organizations. So they all say and share that there is enough information. So all it lacks is the will. So the grant support and the funds are there, but there is not sufficient capacity. Our group thought that people are not still fully capable of sourcing this information. So the informational lack at the level of business, as well as the motivation of the farmer to access this information, and there is insufficient culture of information consumption. I think it's all interconnected. In our group, we had donors as participants, and they stated that a great quantity of information is shared to the farmers, regardless of whether it's Facebook and or other sources, but people may not really get access to it, although it's highly relevant. So how can we work? How can we promote on increasing the value of information consumption? I think it needs to be done via the development of advisory services. Mr. Roman was present there as the representative, and actually it's also a requirement of the European Union for such services to function. Also, our suggestion was an analogy to selling information to the farmer, meaning that this information needs to be marketed. It needs to be enforced on the farmer, and it would be most relevant to be done by someone assigned locally. This must be a person or a few people or a team, like like a sales department, a marketing department for the information to share, to disseminate all the information that's required, that's relevant for the farmer to be institutionally capable. Of course, this would require funding from the state and the donor. As regards the donor organizations, there was a statement that if a donor funds the project and if the funding finished, then not every project will be sustainable. Also, challenge number 5, which we added, it was not listed in our list. It's the local workforce for the representatives of the community, that it needs to be there. Let me tell you that I believe that this is very crucial. Of course, it's very difficult to train. It's not everyone wants to communicate with the business. So just to enhance the institutional capacity of the communities is the key. We need to view them as the full-fledged partner to the state, because they know all of the information about the local farmers. They can help fill the state agrarian registry. So there is a mechanism that we ignore because this is difficult. It's difficult to train the people. Everyone is responsible for the land and for the certificates and everything. So it's quite difficult to really train them into setting the communication with the state. But since we're already at it, since we are already getting on this track, and since we are obliged to do it as part of EU accession alignment, then it should not be difficult to add this more vector. So it is quite challenging, but we need to handle the mindset of the farmer and their ability to take responsibility. That's it. And the information I shared is very important. And if it's at the level of an initiative, so the information is there, go get it. This will not work. Farmers need to be conditioned to source and implement the information. And it's up to us to motivate them, to market it with them. For example, let me give an example of a bank. If a farmer wants a loan, they need to provide a package of documentation. Recently, it was added by a file on the environmental policy. And now even a small farmer already has this environmental policy. And so potentially this could be a way to influence a farmer in order to be to provide the information we need. I believe that this is the way we can take, and everyone needs to pitch in, the business, the donors, the community, and the state. We all need to be equitable partners on this field.
Запрошую четверту групу.
Okay, group 4, you can have the floor. Thank you. Arseny, you're welcome to take the floor. Do you have a poster? No, actually, we do have one, but it's hardly legible. So I will just talk like on my feet. Let me start by saying that we discussed lots of relevant subjects as we were talking about the regulatory environment. And a few things were the same as were mentioned by the previous groups. What I want to highlight specifically is if we talk about the key challenges and if we arrange them 1, 2, 3, our team concluded that the priority needs to flip a little bit. So number 1 remains number 1, but number 3 needs to go in the middle. So now we had quite a curious discussion. We do not understand what is happening in the sectors as to the ability to policy make based on evidential data. So we were looking at 5 industries: milk, dairy products, veterinarian products for treatment of animals. We also looked at potato production, fertilizers, and plant protection and seeds. All of the sub-industries, well, it was quite difficult to kind of reach common ground because, of course, everyone knows specifically what's happening with their field. But if we want to have a general overview, we should mention that for dairy products, the data availability is better because the association has been working for a long time. Let me tell you that lots of data the state derives from the association because the state's service of statistics has been on hold for a while, and then they're trying to use a new methodology. We don't know if it is efficient or not, but now I believe that most of you will agree that just drawing information from open sources to be able to evaluate a tendency or a baseline, it's quite a challenging task. And normally, if it is just, ends up with expert opinions. So some say one thing, others say another thing. So we need to navigate between the two. What I mean to say here is, why do we believe that number 3 needs to be number 2 is because the lack of ability to forecast, a lack of constructive dialogue, the way they need to be, are truly not creating the platform for really bringing together all of the puzzles where all of the stakeholder interests are taken into account. And the conclusion we made, what do we do about it? We need to change the paradigm for decision making. It should be going from the bottom up, not top down, regardless of how long this takes. Any regulation EU regulation, even internal, it may last, it may be considered by months or years if it if it involves the whole sector, and until there's a consensus, nothing is passed, no policy is changed and adopted. Unfortunately, it's not the case in Ukraine. Everything is taken past chaotically, and since this political pressure is there and the high political level of obligation is present, so it's very often that in certain laws some amendments are introduced last minute, and the actual participants of the sector are not aware it, and they just find out from the papers or during an audit. So we are talking about the people who are active, who are willing to be informed. And this brings about another fundamental problem, that is, it is not possible without taking into account the interests of the minor producers. And we, the minor ones, are totally left out of the focus. And we actually were discussing the fact that in order to create effective regulatory environment internally, we need to work from the inside, make sure that it complies with the EU standards. We need to have a bigger representation and formalized impact of the association, similar to the EU, where the expertise, where they can take over some of the tasks, some of the obligations of the state agencies, because they are more aware of the actual needs of the sector, and they can actually have more impact. And this actually complies with the principle that we are trying to implement, that we took as an obligation politically to comply with the standard, with the EU standard. So if we want to put it briefly, so we need to form and develop the infrastructure for information gathering. It needs to be harmonized via a set of industry organizations and associations. Their role as self-governing units needs to be increased, and therefore the minor producers need to be engaged. If you want to work on this market, produce milk and sell it, you need to be part of this association or industry organization or their local branch. Secondly, communication. Change of the paradigm from the top down into the bottom up, then change of approach to formal public hearings and creating a constructive dialogue by giving the tools for opinion voicing. And third that we had is, one more thing that I missed. It is, you should not walk the path of adaptation of some obligations and requirements. We were mentioning this as in the context of how do we facilitate the transition. What works in the EU needs to also work with us. So if it's certified there, it must be certified here. It does not mean that it originates from the EU, but it is about anything. If it's from third countries, but EU has it approved, it's similar to the system that we had with medicine. I don't know if it's already completed or not, by the way, but who needs to be responsible? Since it's policy making, that of course the leader would be the Ministry of Agriculture, and food, but also none of the participants said that they are not willing to share this responsibility where they feel expert and where they try to participate, but it would be nice to make it in a more system-based and partnership approach. Dear colleagues, if I missed something, would you please fill up? But I believe that I mentioned everything. Thank you for your attention.
Дякую, Арсеній. Так.
Thank you, Arseny. Our event is heading to a close. I will not keep you for much longer. I just want to thank you for your engagement, for your work. I hope that you found it productive and constructive, because for us, it was immensely fruitful. We made lots of insights, and we will happy to share the presentation of the study and the recording of this presentation, of this event, with everyone who registered. If you miss it over a few days, kindly reach out. We'll make sure that you receive it. So thank you once again. We'll be finishing now. We wish you to have a great day, a good working week. Stay safe. Goodbye.
Повний звіт ми плануємо закінчити протягом одного місяця.
Yes, we will provide the full summary. I'm not sure that we will be sharing the full summary with everyone, because some of it is distant, especially for the Euro Commission, but we will share the shareable part of it, okay, with everyone who was present today. Also, my colleagues are requesting to give the headsets back kindly as you leave. And also, you're welcome to join the group photo. Everyone who stayed through till the end, kindly come up here for a photo so that you have a souvenir from today.